Hi, I'm Jess, and welcome to another episode of Dose of Pharma. Today, we are joined by two guests. We've got Chloe Landy, who is starting her PhD this year, as well as Victoria Zheng, who is going into her second year of pharmaceutical science. Today, we will be discussing what the first year of university is like and any tips and tricks to make the most out of it. So to begin, we'll have both of you tell us a bit about yourselves. So would you like to start with that, Chloe?
Sure. So, as said, I'm starting my PhD this year. So, I just finished my honours year in the drug discovery biology theme. And I started my degree in 2018. So, I've done 4 years of pharmaceutical science and I've loved it.
Yeah, how about you, Victoria? Can you give us like a brief introduction to who you are?
Yeah, sure. I don't have that much in regards to like what I did like at uni, but yes, I am studying pharmaceutical science and I'm going into my second year this year, and I did like 95% of my first year online. So yeah, that's my uni experience so far.
Yeah, it's a pretty different experience from like Chloe, who had her first year in person.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
So how would you describe your like first day, first week of uni, like right at the start? Like, yeah, maybe let's just start with like your first day. How was that like, Victoria?
Okay, orientation day. Yeah, like I did get a lot of information on like how uni is going to be like, and I realized that it is going to be like quite independent. My first week, honestly, I was a little bit clueless because at the time I didn't know like week one's content will be posted in week 0. So like going to like those Q&A sessions and they were like online, I just like, yeah, I was a bit confused.
Was there like resources or like other people to like help you overcome that confusion?
Yeah, I had 2 other friends. We like stay at the same college, so we kind of like help each other and like navigate like our mood on. Yeah, that really helped.
Yeah. How was your like first day of uni, Chloe?
Definitely very different. Orientation day was a little bit nerve-wracking, like being around so many new people. I guess you didn't really have that face-to-face aspect, Victoria. So it was a bit nerve-wracking, but it was honestly really great in hindsight, to be able to have that experience, because I think that orientation day or week really sets you up to be able to have networks in the future that you can use. Like my first day, we had orientation day. We were split into like groups of 8 or something like that to do various activities, and to kind of stick with one another as a little group. And those 8 people, even though they haven't necessarily been my like best friends or anything, and I sit with them every day, I know I can go to them whenever I need. And so it makes a really great support system for students to have other students to go to when they're confused or lost. So I felt really supported after my first day, really included in the community that is like Parkville Farm.
Yeah. My first day was on campus and I really did feel that like support and that connection that I was able to like then on like the first day of lectures to have people there that I knew. So it wasn't like going to sit down in a hall full of people and you don't know anyone. You've got like those few people who are like, oh, I've seen these people before. I've talked to these people, and it's a lot more comfortable that way.
I think the first day feels very forced. They're like, these are your like buddies and stuff, and like you do these activities and it does feel very forced, but in the long run it makes everything so much easier. Yeah,
I guess I also did have those groups, but we didn't have any activities. But still, like I still feel like quite comfortable with like my group members from the first day. And I've never really sat in a lecture hall, so
yeah, that must be really different, like never having sat in a lecture hall. I don't know if we're going to go back to that, but like, is there anything like you're looking forward to with campus life this year, Victoria, like getting back on campus a bit more?
Yeah, I'm also not expecting like, the lecture hall experience, but I'm just really looking forward to being able to like work like in workshops, because I feel like in-person workshops are definitely like 200% better than like online workshops without the breakout rooms and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, Chloe, do you have any advice for like how to make the most out of being on campus?
Yeah, I would definitely say, other than obviously the social aspect, obviously you get that from being in person, and definitely capitalize that, especially on your first year. Like, it just makes it, again, so much easier if you already know people. But other than the social aspect, I think really, really make the most out of those workshops and your labs as well, because that's where you kind of do the most learning. Like, you can always look back at the lecture recording and like view the content, but when you apply that content, it becomes a lot harder. And it's much more beneficial to use that time while you have someone there that's there to help you and use it effectively than sit around and just attend for the sake of getting your attendance point and then going home and trying to learn it yourself. It's so much harder, and a lot of people struggle that way because, you know, they don't want to be there early in the morning, or they want to be going home. But if you make the most of that time, you'll be a lot more successful and a lot less stressed by the time it comes to your assessment period, because you do have that support system. That's what the TAs are there for when you go to those classes. Whereas when you leave those classes, the TAs are actually PhD students and they've got their own things to do. And, you know, they don't make a lot of time for you outside of the classes, because that's what the classes are for. They're for you to ask questions and do things like that. So definitely make the most of your time there and really do the prep work for those classes, so that those classes, you can make the most out of them. As well as the labs, make sure you know why you're doing what you're doing. Don't just follow the protocol and be like, oh, I'm adding 100 of this into 20 of that. Really, like, ask questions to the TAs and realize why you're doing what you're doing, because a lot of that practical work, I feel bad for Victoria, because that practical work is so integral to your role as a scientist. Like, half of science is research and the other half is doing practical activities, and it just makes your life so much easier if you know basic laboratory skills when you become employed or do your honours or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I guess last year I did have both like online lab experience and like on-campus like lab experience. And yeah, I get what you were saying, that like the practical aspect of being a pharmaceutical scientist is definitely like really important. And like just by doing online labs, like I realized I had no idea what was going on because I wasn't able to like, you know, have that hands-on experience. So yeah.
And watching someone do a lab and actually doing a lab is very, very different. I've watched people do experiments and I can't follow a single thing that's going on, because reading a protocol is very different to understanding the reasons why everything is in that protocol. So certain steps might have more value than others, but you don't know that until you know the theory behind the actual prac. And that's why they do a lot of that prep work. They'll provide you with that basic understanding. And a lot of times, not always, but sometimes I did really skim through that because I'm like, oh, this isn't going to come up. Like, I'm not going to be assessed on it. But then when you go to do these experiments in your honours, you're like, oh, it would have been really good if I knew what this prac was about, or like how to use this technique. So do pay attention, even if it's something that, you know, you can like strive to do, like get your best grades and ignore other things. But I think the way that PharmSci is set up is everything is a learning experience, rather than we're all aiming for 100s, because that's not really what you get out of uni. It's less about the grade and it's more about the experience.
Yeah, that's facts.
Yeah, that's definitely a really good way to put that. You mentioned briefly when talking about workshops, Chloe, that there's like the social aspect and like the learning aspect and getting like the most out of both of those. So how do you find a balance at university between studying and having like the social life at uni?
It's a good question, and I'm laughing because I still haven't really perfected this. I could give you like 100 ways that I've tried to make a balance, but then there's always something that pops up. And so there's never going to be a perfect way. You're never going to be 50-50 on this balance. And I think it depends on what kind of stage of your degree that you're in as well. Like, I certainly found that in first year I was a lot more social, whereas in my honours at times I was doing 7 days a week. And so it really depends on where you're kind of at in your degree. I would say that there are ways that you can implement certain social aspects into your life that make it a lot easier. So like, for example, if you dedicate one day of the week when you get your timetable and say, okay, I'm going to do social things on this day, or you line up your timetable with, your high school friends, then that makes it a lot easier in the long run if you know, okay, well, every Thursday we're both free, let's do coffee. Or, perhaps even on the weekend, a lot of people, or like when I went into studies, I kind of felt like weekends should be more social and weekdays should be study, but it's not necessarily the case because you need to do a lot of prep work in farm side to be ready for your classes. So definitely saying, okay, well, Saturday is my social day and Sunday is my prep day, or vice versa, and just dedicating some time in your schedule to be able to have a social life is important. If you're just going to try and fit things in around study tends to get prioritized and it's really hard. Whereas if you block out that time and say, I can't study these times, it kind of forces you to study in the other times. I don't know if that makes sense, but definitely just blocking out time for your social life in your calendar.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And like prioritizing like different aspects of your life and realizing that you need to have like a balanced life and can't just study all the time or can't just socialize all the time, that you've got to like plan ahead and stuff like that is very important. Victoria, did you get a lot of time to like socialize in your first year? Were you like in and out of like lockdowns and it being online? Did you really have that opportunity to make friends, or how did that go?
I was lucky because I did stay at a college, so I get to make a lot of friends, and it's not like I had to put in a lot of effort to like socialize because I was constantly with them. But I am looking forward, like with going back on campus, to make more friends and, that extra support like at uni, like by making friends at uni, you do have that support system that's different from just your like high school friends. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. Did you ever get like distracted living in a college? Like it's too distracting with all the socialization and wanting to hang out with people and
I
people
think
all
definitely,
the time?
Yeah, I think definitely in a week. First, I didn't know, as I said before, like I was a bit clueless with like how the system works. It was online, and then I had like a lot of all week activities going on. So I definitely felt like I was already behind in like my first 2 weeks, but then I finally like caught up, which was good. And now I really like realize how important it is to like prioritize like something like studying, and then be more organized with my whole schedule thing.
One of the big differences I have found between like high school and going to university is the level of independence you're expected to have as a university student. Like you don't necessarily like have lecturers on your back constantly being like, you have to do this, this, and this. And like, you don't like have your parents there a lot of the time as a uni student being like, you have to study and do your homework and do this. It's a lot more like self-directed. Have you guys found that? And what tips have you used to like develop your independence? Maybe we'll start with Chloe answering that, especially with honours and a lot of independence in your honours year.
Yes. Yeah, I think a step into uni from high school is definitely gaining a lot of independence. But then also if you are going to do an honours or a PhD, that's another whole level of independence because there's no classes. You have to organise everything that you want to do. So I would say the first step, and this is just advice from high school into uni, not necessarily for honours, but be organised, keep on track of everything you have to do, all your due dates, and make sure that you're really reading Moodle. Don't just look at like this week of Moodle, look at like the whole schedule and plan ahead. Good way to do that. I used a paper diary. You don't have to do that. They have really good ones at Muji. But otherwise, like Monash sets you up with a Google Calendar, which can be quite helpful. So definitely like the first tip is be organised. If you're not organised, everything's going to be a shambles. You're going to miss due dates. And again, no one follows up on you. So if you miss something, that's just on you and you just have to cop the zero. So be organised. The second thing about being independent, ironically, is that you have to actually ask for help. So like to be independent, you have to lean on others, which sounds like you're not being independent, but because no one checks up on you, it's your responsibility if you don't understand something to clarify with the people that are available to you. And so again, like in school, if you failed a test, then the teacher would come up and you'd have a conversation and you try and work out how you can be better. If something is not going well for you in uni and you're getting bad marks, no one checks up on you. And so it's really up to you if you want to do well. If you're not understanding something, that you have to seek out that help. And that's how you can become independent, is you can prioritize or realize where you're having troubles and get the help that you need. I think a good way to do that, first of all, is before you go running to the lecturers, who are very, very busy people. You can look on YouTube for videos. You can ask your friends that you've made in O Week or in any of your classes, and you can read the textbook. But if those things aren't really cutting it and you're like completely lost, a lot of lecturers will actually think quite highly of someone that, you know, says, I'm really struggling with this. Can we organize a half an hour meeting just to go through it? And then that way you can get that help without, you know, feeling like you have to bother like an entire class or anything. Because it is a little bit intimidating to ask questions in the middle of like a lecture. People do it. I did it, but I know a lot of people don't do it, and then they would struggle because they didn't feel like they could ask anyone. So ask your TAs in your workshops, ask the lecturers if you feel comfortable, but outside of that, organize like a tutoring or talk to someone and really like actively seek help when you need it, because you can't, if you can work independently, but you might not do well if you're not seeking out help when you need it.
Yeah, that's something that definitely made a difference to my experience at uni, was when I realized that it's okay and it's very actually welcome for you to like lean on those resources, to ask the TAs the questions you have, to ask lecturers questions, to really like use what they're giving you, and to like be involved in like what's going on at uni, in like what you're learning. I think that, yeah, definitely made a big difference to learning rather than just sitting there and taking it in. Victoria, do you have like anything that you really noticed that helped you become independent when you started university?
Well, I think honestly, Chloe's tips are so inspiring to me. I feel like it's like first year I was, definitely trying to find like how to be independent. It is quite different from high school. And what I found helpful for me is to really acknowledge like my weakness and strength. Like I'm talking about like content wise and just like skill wise. And then from there, I can then like, you know, maybe make notes, ask myself questions. But I do think I need to get better at seeking help, because I didn't like online. It's like even more intimidating than being on campus to like ask for help. I think going back on campus definitely helped me a lot with that.
I think it also helps. It's easier to ask help if you have a bit of a rapport with the lecturers. Like definitely in our third year lectures, there would be so much discussion between all the students and all the lecturers. Whereas in our first year ones, it was like the whole room was silent. And, you know, the lecturers don't like when the room is silent. Sometimes they'll throw out like a rhetorical question or like a question that they think, oh, let's get this conversation going. And it's like literally the easiest question ever. It's like, you know, the first thing you had to read on the Moodle page. And people wouldn't answer it because they would feel intimidated. But if you are someone who is comfortable answering those questions just to break the awkward silence, the lecturers do not favour you, but they know you, that you gain a rapport with them, and then it becomes a lot easier to ask for help or discuss problems with them later down the track, because in such a small cohort that is Pharm Sci, you often have the same lecturers like 3 years in a row. And so definitely don't think, oh, like I don't like this lecturer, or not that you wouldn't like them, but, you know, I feel intimidated by this lecturer because they're very intense or something, and don't like talk to them, because if you do talk to them again later down the track, it'll be much easier for you.
To conclude, I'm going to ask you guys, or maybe I'll start with Victoria. What would you do differently if you were going to do your first year again? So you're there on your first day of campus. What are you going to be like, I'm going to do this year instead, because what you did was like, didn't quite work or didn't work as well as it could have, or just like what you would have done differently?
I think definitely time management wise, I would definitely focus more on that aspect of like scheduling all my work. And well, I've never missed a due date or anything, but I think I can definitely get better at it. And also with Chloe, what Chloe said, like asking for help, because I think being online, I was a little bit intimidating of like, you know, answering questions. And yeah, I think that's what I would do differently. Apart from that, maybe more networking. Yeah, so that I wouldn't be as intimidated as I was in my first year.
Yeah, they sound like all like good changes to make that you don't quite realize you should be doing in your first year.
Yeah.
What about you, Chloe? What would you have done differently?
I think for me, the social aspect was really good because I did have that in-person experience. So I think for me, if I had to change something, it would probably be more how I approach study. So I think the great thing about the first semester of first year is actually a lot of it is the same content as VCE. And so there is a little bit, it's not exactly the same, but there is a little bit of repetitiveness. And because of that, I think the first semester of the first year of uni is a really good time to practice different styles of note taking. Because when you're in high school, everything moves very slowly. You do the example with the teacher, they show you step by step what happens. Whereas in a lecture, you could go through like 4 content slides in 2 minutes and you're like, I just missed the whole thing. And so I think having different approaches to note taking is really good because by the time you get to third year, it's just expected that you know how to do all of these things. And I was still kind of perfecting my note taking when I was in like second and third year, whereas in first semester of first year, what I would probably do is do one class with pen and paper, one class on the computer, and then maybe one class, a mixture of both, and see kind of what works for me and what my style is. I did a lot of note taking on my computer and I found that just didn't work for me at all. I couldn't draw diagrams. A lot of Pharma has a lot of like mechanisms and diagrams and things you need to draw. And so a lot of my first year notes were really choppy and changey and they just didn't flow and it made it really hard to study and swap back. So if you have a different approach for each subject, you can kind of see, okay, well, which subjects did I find really easy to study for at the end of the semester and kind of go with that note-taking style in future.
Yeah, that's
I
really
also
good
find
idea.
that like taking like weekly summary was a great change for me. So that I wasn't useful. as like panicking if I like haven't done like the weekly summary.
Yeah, because then you get to like the exam period and you've got the summaries of everything and it's less content to go over, so it's not so intimidating. Yeah, that is all like really good advice that hopefully the first years listening to this can take on board and like have a very successful first year at university. So thank you both for joining me today and discussing like your first year at university and providing plenty of like really useful advice and tips. It's been great hearing from you both.
No worries. So good luck, first years.
Good luck.
Thank you. Dose of Pharma acknowledges the traditional custodians of the various lands throughout Australia on which we connect today and pays respect to elders past, present, and future.